everybody, Dan Bailey here. In today's lesson I want to talk about color and touch on some of the scientific and cultural aspects of color and how we as human beings perceive and also how we seek out color in the use of our work. It's no surprise that we humans are very driven by color. In fact, it plays a very vital role in just about every aspect of our daily lives. In fact, the evolution of our big brains is very much tied to the expanded visual senses that we human beings possess, especially when it comes to recognizing and seeing different colors. As we evolved as a species, our brains needed to keep up with all this new visual information that we were experiencing as we were navigating much more diverse and complex landscapes and environments. In our brains, the number of neurons that are devoted to visual processing make up 30% of the cerebral cortex, and 80% of the visual information our brain processes is directly related to color recognition. This shows you just how much information is needed to process the stuff that we see and recognize on a daily basis. Unlike most of the other mammals in the world, we're trichromats, which means we evolved with trichromatic vision. We have three types of color receptors in our eyes, called cones, that are geared towards recognizing the colors red, green, and blue, RGB. Hey, wait a minute, where have we seen those letters before? We have about 250,000 cones in our eyes, and this allows us to recognize about 7 million different colors. Most other mammals on Earth, even dogs and monkeys, have dichromatic vision. They don't have that third cone which allows them to identify red quite as well as we do. Some humans actually have a form of dichromatic vision called color blindness, which prevents them from correctly identifying the colors red and green. What's even more fascinating is that there are some women on the planet who actually have a fourth cone. They're called tetrachromats. They have tetrachromatic vision, which allows them to recognize and see a huge array of colors that are far expanded from what normal folk can see. And of course, there are many animals in the world, like birds and insects, that have way more cones than we do. The sea shrimp have 16 cones, and animals like this are able to see in wide spectrum like ultraviolet that we humans just can't perceive. So our unique, highly evolved tetrachromatic vision allows us to spot the colors like red more easily, and it allows us to see them from greater distances. As early foraging humans, this played a vital role in our survival as we walked the earth. It helped us spot things like berries, tomatoes, apples, things that we could eat and things that would give us nourishment. It also allows us to quickly spot things that might be a threat to us. Now, either way, our ability to spot these colors so easily gave us a distinct advantage for survival in gaining our nutrition and keeping us safe as a species. When I think about the direct correlation between our big brain evolution and our expanded visual evolution, it kind of makes me wonder, maybe this is why we as human beings, as artists and photographers and painters, are so attracted to landscapes and reproducing scenes in nature. Now think about this for a minute. A significant portion of our brain development as human beings is directly tied to the act of exploring landscapes and seeing the visual spaces around us in nature. As an outdoor photographer and science geek, to me that's a fascinating thing to ponder. Now, there's another aspect that we can add to this. When you combine our biological survival instincts and our needs to recognize different colors in nature with our rich cultural history as human beings across thousands of years of civilizations, you can see why color is so important to us. Every civilization on the planet has used color to define specific moods and traditions. So let's see how our visual systems and our cultural history allows us to perceive and respond to different colors. We can take those ideas and apply them to photography so that you can use them to create more compelling compositions and evoke a stronger emotional response from your viewers. Now we'll start with blue. Now blue is an interesting color because there's almost nothing in nature that's truly the color of blue. Now sure, we perceive the sky and the ocean as being blue, but we know that's an optical illusion based on the scattering diffusion of light particles. But at any rate, we perceive the ocean and the sky as being blue. That being said, blue is a very noble and dignified color, and it projects feelings of calm and tranquility. Green is timeless. Green is the color of leaves and grass, vegetation. Much of nature is green, so it projects a feeling of timelessness in your photographs. Now, an interesting thing about green, our eyes are more sensitive to green light as are camera sensors. So on most camera sensors, you'll have twice as many green pixels as red and blue pixels. Now, if you combine green with blue, you'll create an image that has a very strong feeling of tranquility and timelessness. Very calm, just regal scene. Think about that classic Microsoft Windows desktop photo, where you have the green grass and the blue sky. Probably the most viewed picture in the world. It's been seen by almost everyone on the planet. Billions of people have seen that photo. Maybe that's why Microsoft chose that picture, because it projects a feeling of timelessness and tranquility, which when you think about computers, I'm not sure how that plays into effect, but maybe it keeps us calm when we're at the keyboard. Red, on the other hand, projects excitement. It's the color of blood, the color of combat, the color of kings, the color on the Black Widow's belly. Red incites energy and heightened emotion. As I talked about earlier, our ability to quickly see and identify the color red is very much a fundamental aspect of our advanced human visual system. So red is very eye-catching. You can't avoid looking at the red thing in the photograph, even if it's just a small portion of the image. We're drawn to red because it represents an immediate level of emotional excitement. On the other hand, an image that's predominantly red will tend to overwhelm the viewer. And this is actually a real thing. There's a chemical reaction that happens in the cones when we see red for extended periods of time. There's a chemical depletion that starts to trigger optical illusions and eye fatigue when we are presented with that much red for a given amount of time. Now, this isn't to say that you can't create a photo with a predominantly red color palette. You'll just need to experiment and do it sparingly and find the right look. On some occasions, it can actually be used with great effect. Just don't overuse it. On the other hand, that tiny splash of red in the photograph, no matter what other colors are present, your eye's going to go right to the red like a visual target. That's going to be the first thing you see. So including small bits of red in your compositions can make for very powerful photographs. It's just a matter of where to place those red tones so that you can draw your viewers in and help direct them around the image. Yellow is the brightest color in the spectrum, and like red, it can be fatiguing to look at in large amounts. In fact, it's the most fatiguing color to look at when you have a huge field of yellow. Now that said, things that are yellow are meant to be looked at in photographs and in life. Yellow is the color of school buses and warning signs and that middle light on the traffic signal. So as with red, you should use yellow sparingly in your images to create these hot spots to draw your viewers into the composition. Of course, there are no hard and fast rules here. Use yellow sparingly or use it in great amounts. The key is just to experiment and figure out what works for you and what works for your particular scene. Pink is an interesting color. It actually lies right on the border between the warm and cool side of the spectrum on the color wheel. It's situated right between red and magenta. However, given that it's positioned much closer to red than it is to blue on the color wheel, in photographs, pink is actually perceived as a warm color. Unlike red, you can actually get away with large amounts of pink in your photographs without causing that eye fatigue. It's actually very appealing. In landscapes, we often see pink as being the predominant color of sunset light. I love using pink in my landscape photos. I think it adds a lot of richness and dynamic tone to the scene. We talked about warm and cool colors. Generally, the warm colors, being the reds, yellows, oranges, we're more in tune to those colors. We spot them more easily. As I talked about earlier, those are the colors that represent things that we can eat or things that we need to avoid. And as we saw, those colors tend to work in smaller areas in the photos. The cool colors, on the other hand, dark greens, blues, violets, those are often used as backgrounds or kind of the predominant color of our scenes. So from that standpoint, the cool colors are generally better when used in large amounts, and the warmer and hot colors are best used when used sparingly in small amounts. But again, those are not hard and fast rules. So again, it's all up to your experimentation, your creativity, and the way that you want to show the world. Imagine an all-blue scene with a very tiny red accent versus a predominantly red photo with a small blue accent. Those two photos are going to have a very different type of visual appeal. So you can use those techniques to vary the message that you're trying to convey to your viewers. We're also attracted to opposites on the color wheel, or complementary colors. Yellow and purple, blue and orange, red and green. The eye will be drawn back and forth between those two complementary colors. We want to see them equally, so we'll go back and forth, and you can create a lot of motion in your image. So experiment with complementary colors with regard to placement and the amount of impact that each color represents in the image. So I'm going to end it here. I hope you found this lesson informative. I'm fascinated by this stuff. I have a real interest in the correlations between our scientific evolution and our, the ways that that affects our creativity and our photography as artists. If you'd like to continue to explore photography on a cerebral level with me, be sure and check out my Photography on the Brain video lesson series. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Have fun with your camera out there, and we'll see you next time.